Chinatown is widely regarded as one of the best American movies ever made, by critics and audiences alike. As such, there are plenty of easily accessible academic papers and reviews dissecting it and discussing it, both why it's a great movie and why it's a significant movie. Because this is a video based on what I love about the movie, I'll mostly just stick to my own personal opinions and observations, but just know there's plenty more discussion out there. As we learn in the opening scene, Jake Gittes is a private eye. Just by the nature of that work, you know that makes him a bit of a loner. He's not part of a police force or a team, he's just Jake Gittes. That work also makes him kind of detached from the society around him. He's just an outside observer taking pictures, not really taking any moral stance or siding with anyone. And Jake shows that he is in fact attached. Even in the opening scene, we see him give comfort to Carly in the most patronizing way.
What can I tell you, kid? You're right. When you're right, you're right. And you're right.
And use sarcasm on the faux Mrs. Mulray.
No, really?
Because he feels the need to distance himself from their problems. These qualities in Jake can be traced back to the origins of the hard-boiled detective genre, which dominated 1940 cinema starting with The Maltese Falcon, directed by none other than John Huston, who plays Noah Cross in Chinatown. The traditional hard-boiled detective is self-reliant, isolated, and a social mediator trying to maintain urban order. He's a cultural middleman, neither a cop nor a criminal, which is why Jake fits this mold precisely. He keeps his emotions and morals out of his work and is just an aloof investigator. More on that later. Evelyn Mulray serves as another archetypal character from the genre, the femme fatale, sometimes called the femme noire. Traditionally, her purpose is to manipulate the male lead. Her intentions are never clear until the end of the film, and she's often the main antagonist. And up to a certain point, Evelyn Mulray follows this to a T.
And I still think that you're hiding something.
To begin with, she's cold and ruthless.
I don't get tough with anyone, Mr. Gittes. My lawyer does.
And even after she drops the lawsuit and becomes seemingly less antagonistic, she's still clearly hiding something.
You sue me, your husband dies, you drop the lawsuit like a hot potato, all of it quicker than the wind from a duck's ass. Excuse me. Then you ask me to lie to the police.
And is purposefully and frustratingly evasive.
I dislike the word cheat.
In classics such as The Maltese Falcon, Double Indemnity, and Out of the Past, the detective hero becomes romantically involved with the femme fatale, only to find that she's behind everything that he's investigating. With his knowledge of the genre, it's no surprise that in the scene following Jake and Evelyn sleeping together, we see that she is hiding Hollis's missing girlfriend. And with the knowledge of how those other films ended, our expectation for Chinatown is that the hero will have to choose between romance and justice. And as a detached cultural middleman who keeps his emotions out of his work, we know he's going to choose justice. And it very much looks like our expectations are correct, as Jake is prepared to turn Evelyn over to the police.
I'm gonna make it easy for you. You were jealous, you had a fight. He fell, he hit his head, it was an accident.
And then Chinatown turns our expectations and the entire genre on its head.
She's my sister and my daughter!
Because the movie followed genre conventions so closely, this comes completely out of left field. The movie pulls the rug out from under the audience and Jake.
You may think you know what you're dealing with, but believe me, you don't.
It turns out Evelyn Mulray is a victim, and the real villain is Noah Cross. Not that there weren't hints.
What does this C stand for?
Cross.
You've already got one going, Mrs. Mulray.
Oh.
Does, my talking about your father upset you?
You saw my father?
Notice that Evelyn shakes her head at the suggestion of rape.
He raped you?
While this was most certainly rape, it likely wasn't the case that her father forced himself onto her one time. It was more likely a slow, consistent manipulation of her implicit trust in her father, and he purposefully convinced her that such a relationship was okay.
I don't blame myself.
Hence, she doesn't think of it as rape, which I see is even worse, because it's not only an invasion of her body, but it's also damaging psychological deception. And you know that such a fate awaits Catherine as well. That's why I see Noah Cross as such an insidious villain. He's narcissistic, sociopathic, and power-hungry, not only using the invisible hand of influence to screw over an entire city in order to line his own pockets,
Either you bring the water to L.A., or you bring L.A. to the water.
but also using the trust and naivety of his daughter for his own sexual satisfaction and control. He's a representation of the powers that be in the world. living proof that if you have enough money and influence, you can do anything without consequences.
See, Mr. Gitz, most people never have to face the fact that at the right time and the right place, they're capable of anything.
Which brings us back to the traditional hard-boiled detective hero. He isolates himself from society, from both the civilized and the corrupt, because he can't distinguish between them. That's why Jake keeps his emotions out of his work and doesn't take sides, because with savages like Noah Cross masquerading as civilized, he runs the risk of inadvertently taking the wrong side.
You're dealing with a disturbed woman who just lost her husband.
My father is a very dangerous man. You don't know how dangerous.
I think that also explains what he did back in Chinatown.
As little as possible.
The district attorney gives his men advice like that.
They do in Chinatown.
In a society so deeply rooted in corruption, you can never be sure if you're helping the good guys or the bad guys.
You can't always tell what's going on.
And so the only safe choice is to do as little as possible. And that's one of the running themes of Chinatown, Jake's main struggle. Within the first 3 minutes of the movie, he gives this advice to the fake Mrs. Mulray.
Do you know the expression, let sleeping dogs lie? You're better off not knowing.
When there's so much evil and corruption hiding all around you, sometimes ignorance is an ally. But Jake doesn't follow his own advice.
So let's just drop the whole thing. Sugar, lemon, or both?
Both, Mrs. Mulray.
Yes, Mr.
I don't
Gittes?
want to drop it.
Mostly because he's embarrassed that he got fooled. His pride draws him in.
Look, somebody's gone to a lot of trouble here, and lawsuit or no lawsuit, I intend to find out. I'm not supposed to be the one who's caught with his pants down.
And after working the beat in Chinatown, where he did as little as possible, Jake should know better.
You never learn, do you, Jake?
In a place like Chinatown, where inaction is encouraged, letting emotion provoke you to action can be dangerous.
I was trying to keep someone from being hurt. I ended up making sure that she was hurt.
When Jake gives into his emotions, showing compassion towards Evelyn by sparing her the trauma of revealing Catherine's identity to the police,
Well, you can't take the train, Escobar. I'll be looking for you everywhere. You better just get out of here. Leave all this stuff here.
it's no surprise that it leads him right back to where he's been hiding from.
Jesus. It's in Chinatown, ain't it?
I know where it is, just do it.
And, unfortunately, Jake's return to Chinatown gives him the same result. Him trying to keep Evelyn from getting hurt by letting her get away and stopping Escobar, only making sure she gets hurt by leading Noah Cross to Catherine and giving Loesch a clear shot. Also note the foreshadowing of both Jake's actions
I'm not going to make the same mistake twice. Thank you, General.
and Evelyn's fate. And with this ending, which is one of my favorite endings to any movie, not only does Jake's past come back to haunt him, but so does director Roman Polanski's. Screenwriter Robert Towne, who would go on to win an Oscar for this script, originally penned a different ending where Evelyn kills her father to protect Catherine. But Polanski refused such an ending, saying, quote, "I did not believe in a happy ending in this type of a movie." This disagreement with Polanski actually caused Robert Towne to leave the production, forcing Polanski and Jack Nicholson to write a new ending literally days before they shot it. Now, regardless of your feelings toward Roman Polanski and what he did in the years following Chinatown, it's indisputable that he suffered an unspeakable tragedy in the years before making Chinatown. His wife Sharon Tate, while 8 months pregnant, was brutally murdered in their Los Angeles home in what would become one of the most notorious crimes in U.S. history. Filming Chinatown 4 years later was Polanski's first time returning to Los Angeles since losing his wife, and he actually almost backed out of the project because he wasn't sure he could handle being back in the same city where she was killed. And while Polanski has never explicitly said that his wife's death played a factor in the creation of Chinatown's bleak ending, it's hard to believe that it didn't at least play a small role. Because what this ending confirms is that bad things happen no matter what actions we take. Jake's refusal to talk about the past doesn't make the past go away.
You really don't like to talk about the past, do you?
Ignoring the corruption, doing as little as possible, doesn't make the corruption go away. And attempting to face the past by returning to Chinatown, or bring justice to the corrupt by appealing to Escobar,
Just listen to me for 5 minutes!
will only bring more suffering. There's a line that was cut from the first scene, where Curly says that he should kill his wife.
Just no good.
And Jake remarks that he's not rich enough to kill anyone, which is haunting foreshadowing. Because when evil like Noah Cross gains enough power, there's no such thing as justice.
He owns the police!
There ceases to even be a right and wrong. There's only the will of those in power. Look at Jake's expression of stunned horror and disbelief as his powerlessness becomes clear. In this way, Chinatown is a microcosm of the world we live in. Like 1930s LA, the world is run by the few, and we, the many, have no choice but to live with how they choose to run it. And the only reasonable response to this powerlessness is detachment.
Forget it, Jake. It's Chinatown.
Hello, Claude. Where'd you get the midget?